Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I think this is live. Good evening. Hello. It's weird doing live streams again from my laptop. It's really strange. It's been a month off of doing it. I'm just trying to remember when not to look. Try not to look at my face as I do this, otherwise I end up just looking at the screen the whole time. This is new. Okay, this is kind of interesting. So how's everyone doing this evening, or wherever it is, or whatever time you're watching this? It's Friday evening here in the UK. It's weird because in the UK, lockdown lifted a bit on Monday. So the shops are open, the bars and the restaurants are open again. So it's really weird that now, because we live quite close to the city centre-ish, I can hear people out and about getting rowdy and getting drunk again. So it's a really weird feeling and sensation. So I'm wondering how we are, or you are all doing, because some of you are in different countries. Not everyone here is in the UK. And even if you're in a different country, different countries have different rules depending on the states. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it's a very uncertain feeling. You know, it's been going on for over a year now, and I'm definitely aware of this constant uncertainty. And oh God, this sounds really heavy where I'm going with this. Maybe this has been something I've been thinking about for a while. I wonder how you've been doing. Anyway, I'm gonna move on. Move on to a more pleasurable topic, which is the vulva. It's weird, as I said that, I sound like a bloody teacher. Let's talk about vulvas today. And it's, as I'm doing this talk, I'm trying to make it as juicy and embodied as possible. So I did a live stream earlier on the seafront on Brighton for Instagram, talking about libido and turning yourself on. And I saw a post by somebody else who I follow talking about pussy and vulva. And it reminded me, and I was thinking about when I first got into the whole sex world, quote unquote, sex world, if you call it that, when I was deconverting, when I was coming out of Christianity, and when I was on my own healing path to try and recover from chronic illness. And I was doing a lot of my own exploration. And I was trying to bridge that gap between sex and spirit, because like many people who, I guess many millennials who brought up in the 90s and 90s and people before me, I wasn't really brought up in a very pleasure affirming, pleasure permissive, vulva positive society. I don't really think anybody was or is. You know, the sex education I got at my high school was pretty bog standard. It was either STI prevention, or we actually had a lot of sex education from the high school Christian group leader. So I was about as knowledgeable about my own vulva and about as connected to my own vulva as, I guess, the average of many women and vulva owners. And it was when I was in that process of deconversion. So I was looking at everything around spirituality and looking at sexuality. I remember when I first started watching porn, that was a really interesting experience, because there was still that, is this wrong? And when I was first started to self-pleasure, you know, consciously, there was still that feeling of, oh my God, is my dead granddad watching me? You know, is this still wrong? Is this still bad? There was still that feeling of, oh God, this is wrong. I'm touching my vulva. And one thing that I realized, and one thing that really helped me reframe it, it wasn't just reading things saying it's okay to touch your vulva. I had to be reading and absorbing materials that were overtly vulva and pussy positive, because it's not enough. I know for me it wasn't enough to read, yeah, you're probably not going to hell for touching yourself, you know, sex is good, vulvas are good. I had to actually read and absorb material and do exercises that were, my pussy is amazing, my vulva is amazing, it's a pleasure portal, it's a key to self-empowerment. In my live stream, I was talking about when I first read Sex for One by Betty Dodson, which I call one of the Bibles for women. And it's a manifesto on self-pleasuring for women and people with vulvas, on that when you know your vulva, when you know how to turn yourself on, when you know all of your anatomy and your pleasure anatomy, this is empowerment. And this is the ultimate female woman empowerment. It's knowing how to pleasure yourself. And it's far deeper than just knowing how to, kind of the nuts and bolts when I kind of do a little map. It's this, when you're touching and pleasuring yourself, it's that I'm doing this for myself and I'm allowed to touch my vulva. More than that, I'm allowed to experience pleasure for myself. And it doesn't have to be reliant on a partner or only because a partner's there. So it was reading that, and it was doing various exercises that I had to learning to love my vulva. For me, it was not just a cognitive process. And this is, I'm guessing this is a very similar process for you if you've been on that journey of learning to love your vulva. It's one thing to say, yep, vulvas are good, vulvas are great, or maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you're at this place still where it's like you can just about say vulva. Or, a lot of women I know can't even say vulva or vagina. They're still like, down there. And then I wonder, but even when you've gotten past that stage, you can say vulva without feeling too embarrassed. It's more than that. It's deeper than that. It's then, do I feel that my vulva is connected to my body? Again, it sounds like a very no-brainer. Well, of course it's there. But how much can you actually feel it? Because once you kind of cognitively know, okay, my vulva, it's not, doesn't smell like fish, it's not meat flaps, it's not a clunge or whatever, maybe it's a good thing. But there still has to be that mind-vulva connection. So for me, I looked at pictures of vulvas, I could say vulva, but definitely for me and for many people I've been on workshops and retreats with and with clients, it's very different to having a very physical, embodied experience, which is why, when I work, and many people like me work, it's not just about talking about sexuality, it's doing embodied exercises. So for me, it was actually looking at my vulva in a mirror. I'm holding my hand out here. It was touching my vulva, but with intention. Something I learned very early on is it any surprise that a lot of women have a very uncomfortable, messed up relationship with their vulvas, when the only time you touch your vulva is when you're toileting, when you're menstruating, or when another partner is touching it. That's for a lot of women. And maybe you'll touch your vulva self-pleasuring, maybe. And then how much of that, I'm wondering, even for women who do self-pleasure regularly or have kind of gotten around the idea where you've gotten your sex toy, you've gotten your vibrator, it's like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna give myself an orgasm. I'm wondering how much guilt is still there, how much feeling of wrongness is still there, how much feeling of, should I really be doing this? What if my dead granddad saw me? And I wonder that, I say this from personal and professional experience, it's when you are loving your vulva and getting to know your vulva again and learning to experience pleasure, it's not just a cognitive thing. You will find that when you start really doing embodiment exercises through consciously touching your vulva, and I mean touching with intention, so you're actually looking at yourself, touching your vulva, you're naming all of the parts, you're feeling the pleasure spots, you're feeling into the places of sensitivity and the places of numbness, and then being aware, being mindful of what you're thinking and how you're feeling. Because I would bet, probably my tea collection, that for most women and vulva owners, there will still be that, it's disgusting. Oh, is this wrong? Is this wrong? Is this like, I'm wondering if that's come up for you when you first started to touch your vulva or get to know your vulva. Maybe that's still a process for you where it's like, please, I hope you enjoy my funny faces. Because when we have, I say we, you, everyone has absorbed all of these very negative messages around vulva and vulvas and pleasure, because nobody grew up in a society or culture that was overtly affirming of women and girls exploring their sexuality and their pleasure. There isn't a culture. Or if there is, I am probably mistaken, but I have not heard of it. It's not in the mainstream, it's not in a lot of consciousness. You will have internalized those messages. You know, when I was at high school, it was very much vaginas smell like fish. And, you know, there's that feeling of, oh, vulvas, they're kind of, they're fleshy, they're sweaty, they get odor, they produce gunk and funk and ick. You know, I've spoken with and worked with women where in many cultures there's so much taboo around a woman's vulva that your underwear has to be washed separately from everybody else's clothes, where there's so much disgust and cultural and societal disgust that you then internalize about your vulva. So with all of that going on, how can you really love your vulva and actually enjoy sex and pleasure? So kind of going back to my own experience, because obviously my own experience does inform my professional work, and I hope that by sharing some of this that you'll find some normalization. I definitely did not grow up, or as a young person, I was definitely not sex positive. I had very little clue around sexuality, as much as most teenagers at the time, as much as most young people did. You know, I grew up in the church. I was involved in evangelical Christianity. That's not very sex positive or pleasure affirming. And even if I hadn't been involved in the church and Christianity, you know, most secular culture in the 90s and noughties in London, not particularly sex positive or friendly or affirmative towards women either, if you think about it. So this is a roundabout way of saying that learning to love your vulva more and how to do it has to be an embodied process. So that is actually touching your vulva with awareness, with consciousness. It's actually looking at your vulva. I'm using my hand here as an example. That means getting a mirror and looking at your vulva and naming all of the parts. And maybe for some people, maybe you're still at that place where it feels really uncomfortable and really triggering. And if that's the case, then you're really going to love the shameless woman. And then it's how comfortable can I start self pleasuring in a way where I'm reaffirming to myself, this is good. This is good. This is good. This is good. My body's good. My body's delicious and delightful. Pleasure's amazing. Oh my God, I'm aware that as I say this, I'm really scared that Facebook's going to shut me down. My wonderful vulva is wet and puffy, and I'm opening and I'm opening, and pleasure's amazing. And can you keep reaffirming that to yourself? Because that's how you start to really love your vulva in a way that feels embodied rather than, yeah, I know I should, you know, because, you know, I hear this a lot where a lot of women I speak to or I work with, I know logically, cognitively, I've made peace with it. Vulvas are good. My vulva's good. If they have children, I talk to my kids about their vulvas in a really positive and affirming way. Cannot get out of my own head when it comes to mine. I still think my fanny's weird. I still think fannies are something weird and disgusting, and I just. Ugh. If that is the case, and I know there are many of you who have this, and if you don't have it because you work damn hard to get over it, or you grew up, you were very lucky to have affirming parents. Learning to get over that, learning to transform that takes rewiring. And that's why you need to also have and be surrounded in a positive, affirming community and group of friends or spaces that affirm you and say, yes, your pussy's amazing. Vulvas are awesome. Clitorises are awesome. Vaginas, G-spots, orgasms, splooge. You need to be in those environments Because again, think about it. If you're surrounded by a culture or environment that is, you don't talk about it, it's behind a grey curtain, it's used in euphemisms, you need to be in a different environment to change that perspective. It was, I remember being in different tantra and conscious sexuality workshops where it just completely blew my mind. Being in a space where vulvas and pussies and pleasure was celebrated. And in some cases, it was a portal to the divine, it was a portal to my power. I had to have those spaces and that reframing that this is actually a seat of my power. It is maybe a seat to the divine. It's a place where I can tap into my health and my vitality and my joy. I had to be in those places. And I sometimes had to have somebody with me, during various exercises and workshops where people would hold my hand or be with me through that process. Talking about vulvas and sexual healing, as you can tell, it's something that I really love doing and I love talking about and I love being with. Um, in some ways, I feel in many ways I'm really grateful that I got into the world of sex positivity and tantra, and I say the sex world in my mid-20s or in my early 20s, because it helped. I guess in your early 20s, your brain is still developing. It helped reframe things at an earlier stage. And when you're immersed in a world like that, it's still a bit of a culture shock sometimes. And then, I used to joke, talks before, I used to be an evangelical Christian and now I'm an evangelical sexologist. Because the transformation and the joy that you see on a woman or person's face when it's not just known cognitively, it's not just, yeah, I had an orgasm and it was good. It's that light that comes into their eyes. It's that feeling, and I've had this so many times, and I've done it and I've seen it with my clients, where it's like, I can actually feel my vulva. I can actually feel it. They could feel it before, kind of. For some women and vulva owners, they still can't feel it. I describe it as like an energetic black hole. You can't see my hands, but like an energetic black hole. But it's like I knew it was there, but I can actually feel it. It's like that they're talking to each other. My vulva's actually talking to my body. And think about it. When you have numbness or disconnection in a body part, well, how much pleasure can you feel in that body part? Let me just let somebody in. It was a book, one of the books I read in my own healing path, which has been long and still is ever unfolding. How many of you have read the book Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine? Curious if you've read that book. And it's not about sexuality, it's about trauma healing. I've been getting a lot more into somatic work and trauma healing for myself, and it's something that I embody as part of my work with clients and on group programs. And Peter Levine talked about that trauma healing in essence is soul retrieval, in that when we are traumatized, and by traumatized it can be a small t or a capital T. By that it can be big things, it can be small things. Often for a lot of us it can be lots of small things and maybe a few big things. But what happens is there's the idea that our soul becomes fragmented. This isn't getting too woo, but a lot of healing or integration is about integrating all the parts again. And this is the same with sexual healing or healing our sexuality. It's just reintegrating those parts again that were lost. This is especially if, and it's not just if you've had non-consensual experiences, although I know we know how common they are. How many of you here have had boundary violations and non-consensual experiences? But even if you were fortunate in that that hasn't happened to you, again, we all live and grow up in and are immersed in a society and a culture that is not affirming. towards women, sex and pleasure, and is definitely not very positive towards vulvas and female health. So even if you had nothing big happen to you, and by the way, I know that 99.9% of women and non-binary folk have had boundary violations of some kind, or at the very, very least, you have had sex that you didn't really enjoy and did not want to be having, where you felt tuned out and where you felt like, you know what, I'd rather be anywhere but here, but I'm going to keep myself quiet. I'm going to just shut my mouth and wait for him or her to finish. All of that, again, creates this fragmentation, this where you become tripped out and disembodied. So when you are learning to love your vulva, and that means by doing different exercises of just basically touching your vulva, it's like you're almost integrating it back into yourself again. If I was to really feel into the key, if I could summarize everything that working with sexuality and being a sex positive woman is, it's that your sexuality belongs to you. Your pleasure belongs to you. Your vulva belongs to you. And how much can you really know that on a deep cellular level? How much do you really feel that your vulva and your body, your sexuality, are yours first? And how much do you still feel that you're giving it to a partner or outsourcing it to a partner? Or, well, I can only get some action if I'm in a relationship or hooking up with people. And it's this really simple yet very powerful shift of, well, if it's mine first and I can experience and express my eros and my sexuality in a way that's in integrity and in alignment with myself, what would I say yes to? And what would I say no to? Who would or wouldn't I be involved with? What would I want to do more of? All of these big questions. You don't have to know them all right now. But this is why I love doing it with myself, doing it for myself and facilitating it. It's this ongoing unpeeling, I see it, of my pleasure is mine, my body is mine, my vulva is mine, the inside of my vagina is mine. And by the way, this is something that I still have to keep practicing myself. I know that it's very easy for, in the stuff I create, in the videos and the blogs and all sorts of things, it's very easy for me to give the impression, or for anybody to give the impression that, well, this is where I was then and I'm completely over it now. Done. I'm completely over it, no problems at all. And that's not true at all. I've done blog posts talking about my experiences and my journey with vulva pain and chronic yeast infections. Learning to really love, and not just love, but feel that my vulva and my vagina are connected to me and feel them really deeply is something I still have to keep practicing and still doing. I've had really big shifts and I've let go of a lot, but there are still times when even I feel that feeling of, I'm touching my vulva now. Yeah. I really want to be mindful in any future videos and stuff I put out there that, even though I've definitely healed a lot within myself, and I definitely help facilitate this for you, for clients, for group programs, I'm not at this place where I am completely multi-orgasmic all of the time. There's no such thing as, I'm not at the pinnacle. I'm not at the summit. Why am I doing my hand like this? There's no summit to get to unless you want to go through your sexual response. I'm still unfolding myself. And I've definitely come a long way, but I'm still a human having a human experience. Let's take a drink. I'm getting a really dry mouth. back into fizzy water over the past year. I really like fizzy water. Really like it with lemon as well, but this doesn't have lemon, it's just straight from the bottle. So I'm curious, if you're watching this, what is coming up for you? What are some of your takeaways? When I stop recording, I'll put some brief summary of what I've covered here, because I'm at like 25 minutes now, and I'm aware that, you know, it's a lot of time. I've been talking a lot of time, right? I'd love to hear from you. What have been your experiences when you're working with your own sexual healing? What have been some milestones for you? What have been those aha moments where you actually felt like something shifted, that you actually felt that your vulva belonged to you? So there's one more thing that I'm going to speak into. That's probably the topic of the video in itself. And that's, I know many people, many women who work with birth, whether they're doulas, midwives, hypnobirthing. And of course, I know many women who've given birth, who've had childbirth. And there we go. Hi, Lucy. And something in me wonders, and it's how much would we be changing birthing experiences? How much would we be changing any experience when a woman has to have a pelvic floor exam, or a pelvic exam, if you really felt connected to your vulva and you loved your vulva? Because what happens when you don't, when there's a feeling of disgust, a feeling of disowning of your vulva? What happens is there's an element of numbness, an element of disconnection, and there'll be an element of anxiety and fear there. And, you know, if I think of the times when I have had various pelvic exams and swabs taken and things inserted into me, be they fingers or speculums, and even that has felt very vulnerable for me. But I'm able to relax and I feel very comfortable with my vulva. I wonder how much more difficult it is, or how much more painful it could be or would be if you still feel this anxious and anxiety around your vulva. And this is why learning to love your vulva is not just about having better sex with your partner. I guess I want to finish on, when you are learning to love your vulva and when you are learning to express your full orgasmic and pleasure potential, the goal is not to do it, well, you may go into it. A lot of people, a lot of women, a lot of people go into it because you want to have better sex with your partner, and that is absolutely valid. But I really hope that underneath that it's much more than just having better sex with your partner and more satisfying sex. It's about completely revolutionizing your relationship with your body and feeling empowered in your pleasure and feeling like an erotic being, and knowing you are a sensual and erotic being, and how would that ripple out into the rest of your life, and how would that change your life? It would be that you can turn yourself on, and life is a turn on experience, rather than, well, it's so that me and my husband or my partner or my wife or my girlfriend or my boyfriend or whoever I'm with, so that I can have a few more orgasms. And I know that if you're in this group, you've all experienced that form, you've all gone through that feeling of sadness and grief when you just don't feel good about sex. That gulf between you and your partner, where maybe on Instagram you're posting coupley pictures and trying to pretend you're loved up, but in reality you feel a million miles away from them, and you feel that there's something deeply wrong with you, and that you and your partner have this massive chasm opening up between you, and you're terrified they're going to leave because you can't get your head around the whole sex thing. So if any of this has resonated with you, I would love to hear in the comments below. And this is speaking into you. So you know that I had some time off because of long COVID and burnout. Now I'm back. I say back with an asterisk. I'm easing back into work slowly. And this is why the next group offering I want to offer, group program I want to offer, and I'm planning to offer, she says, fucking up her words, I'm keeping it very small, just 6 women. And that way I can really give you more intimate and personalized support than a larger group. And why I keep harping on about group programs and experiences so much. Thanks, Ella. Why I keep harping on about group program, being in a group. You've had some taster of that being in this group already, and you may be in other sex positive groups as well. And by all means, be part of them. You'll know that how valuable it is being in a group, a community of people who are on your wavelength, who you can talk to, who you can bounce off. I know that I've experienced some really deep shifts just by being in a space with people, talking about sexuality, talking about my stuff, talking about the things I could never talk about to other people before I entered the sex world. And it's within groups that you see yourself and other people, and that you realize, oh, thank God, I'm not weird after all. Oh God, thank God somebody else has got that as well. And you feel more human and more normal. You know, especially as sex is the thing we don't talk about, we don't go there. And for many of you in this group, I know that this is one of the few spaces where you can explore and you can learn, because I know for many of you, you cannot talk to your friends or your family about sexuality. It's still that topic where we don't go there. There is a screen we don't go through. And this is why being in a group is really important, because you realize that not only are you definitely not alone, but there are other people just as weird as you and me. And that experience in itself, especially as we definitely, I say we, often when I say we, I'm often meaning myself as well, because I know how much I have missed being in communities. I've missed my people, I've missed being with people. And at the same time, every time I've been part of a group, thanks Ella, every time I've been part of a group, often virtual because it's been COVID, I felt more human, I felt more normal, I felt less frazzled and stressed. So the Shameless Woman program is just going to be for 6 women for 12 weeks. I have not created the web page yet because I've been very much taking my time and going slowly. So if you would like to learn more, drop me a private message and I'll send you the very fancy Google Doc with all of the information. It is going to be slightly different from when I've run it before, in that the content's going to be slightly different. There's actually going to be less content. The last time I ran it, you know, I had really good feedback, but some of them said, but there was just so much stuff in there that I couldn't get it all in, and that's part of my my excitable puppy within me that just wants to spread it all. So this time there's going to be a lot less content and more time to let it assimilate and process, because we all need time to let it marinate and process and trickle down. And also because I know you're busy, you have a life, even if it's a semi-life, because it's still maybe lockdown where you are, but we all have shit to do. You maybe have families, you have things you have to do. I do not expect you to give all of your time to this experience. You need that time off. So there'll be less content and more place to experience and to move and to breathe. So the early bird does end on May 26th. There are April 26th, and there'll be lots of burping from me usually, and there are payment plans available as well to get the best deal. Do drop me a private message, and if you're interested, I will happily hop on a call with you and see if it's right for you, and then I can't wait to welcome you. Any questions, drop me a private message, and I will hang up. I'm not on the phone. I'll end this in a second and I'll write a couple of notes, just so that if you're watching this on the replay, it's not like, oh my God, she's talking for 35 minutes on vulvas. Yes, I am. Have a lovely Friday evening, or whatever time you're watching this, and I'll see you soon. Okay.